Hello, welcome to wait. I know I said Thursday, Wednesday night's Hotline Live with Record
Good
Sport.
start, Dan.
Wonderful
Positive start.
absolutely brilliant. Start as we mean to go on. Welcome to Hotline Live. I'm joined as ever by the mesmeric duo of Keith Jackson. Keith, how's it going?
Well, I've been torn away from the tennis again, and it's roasting in here, and I've clearly overclubbed. I'm mixing my analogies here, but yes, I'm wearing too much. I'm not about to strip off. Let me hasten to add.
Where are we going here?
But it is ridiculous levels of heat in here, and I should have known better. So nobody but myself to blame.
And after a mini secondment, Scott, you're back.
I'm back by popular demand, Daniel. Apparently,
Absolutely.
So,
The tripod wasn't the same without you.
don't know if I'll be any use right enough, but I'm back.
Well, look, there's plenty.
First time Scotty and tripod's been mentioned in the same sentence.
Eddie.
Do you know, as soon as I said it, I thought that's an open goal. There's plenty to talk about, so I think we do need you, Scott, to be honest. We were talking off air there, Keith, about the amount of transfer rumours, names.
It's getting crazy, isn't it?
It's becoming pretty mad.
It's getting crazy.
I can't really remember a time like this, to be honest.
Yeah, well, brace yourself, because I feel as if it's going to go on throughout the course of this summer. I did mention previously, it almost feels like there's a bit of an arms race going on between Celtic and Rangers right now as they gear up for next summer. The both of them are tooling up. Celtic are taking this threat from across the city seriously, and it's going to be fascinating to see where this all ends up. There's so many names flying about, it's becoming almost impossible to check them all out and run them all down. But I think today, obviously, as we predicted, Nasser Djiga became the sixth new arrival since the takeover at Rangers. I'm looking at it by my counting. You've still got Connor Cody, I expect to sign. Latest news today, obviously linking Rangers with Djeidi Gassama, a winger at Sheffield Wednesday with a really interesting sort of background and pedigree. And then you've got all sorts of other rumours. You know, the Owen Beck thing has gone quiet but hasn't gone away. There was interesting reports coming out of Sheffield today that Rangers might be interested in putting a deal together, not just for Gassama but also for Josh Windass. Remember him? Mm-hmm. And talking of familiar faces, reports coming out of Romania which claim that Yanis Hadji's agents have gone back to Rangers in the last couple of days. I think he was looking at a move to maybe Turkish, and it's not come off. He's still a free agent, and there is suggestions emanating out of Romania that they have gone back to Rangers to offer him up on the sort of terms that Rangers might have been willing to offer before he left the club. All that bubbling away at Rangers. Celtic have got 5 in the door already. And there's links to, you know, I've got 6 here, but there's probably more than that. Although really interesting that Isak Jansson, the winger that kind of spoke about the other night, and I kind of suggested, of all the names I've seen floating about, that one was the one that had sort of Brendan Rodgers' fingerprints on it. But it looks as if he's going elsewhere for about £8 million, which again is the sort of fee that I'm sure Brendan Rodgers would think that Celtic should be more than capable of matching or beating. Interesting again, another one that's come up today, Louis Barry. We talked about him frequently over the January transfer window. I think you were very excited about it, Daniel.
Mm-hmm.
He went to Hull on loan, I think with an option or a commitment to buy, an obligation for 3.5 million. Again, in Celtic's terms, that's you know, chicken feed. But Hull have been hit with a transfer embargo, and that deal appears to be, you know, off the table now. Now, given that he was a person of apparent some interest to Brendan Rodgers in January, well, if he's available for 3.5, is he another one to feed into this frenzy of names and speculation? It make your head spin, and we're only in, you know, it's only the 9th of July here.
Yeah.
So, you know, with so many weeks of this window left open, And with Celtic, with the spending power they've got, I just think it's going to get even more interesting and a bit frantic between now and the start of the season.
Another summer signing we should mention, Keith, Mark in the comments says, how good was Inamura yesterday? We obviously did a watch along for Celtic against Cork City, and we will talk about Inamura and Celtic's targets a little bit more in depth. But I've got so many comments and questions on Rangers targets. Can I throw these at you, guys, if that's all right?
Charge on.
First of all, I want to start with this one from SheffieldWednesdayFC.com. Rangers fans pretty fall in love with Gassama. He's got better ball control than Bonnie Blue. I don't know who that is, but Keith, you were telling me that's someone you're familiar with.
That's not a conversation that I've taken any part of. Who's Bonnie Blue?
No, Scott, do you know?
No, I've no idea, Daniel.
Nah, must be a player or something.
I think she's a player, all right.
Must be a big Rangers fan with a name like that.
Aye, definitely, aye. Rangers Easy OK says that's 6 summer signings, soon to be number 7 with Gassama. I genuinely think we'll sign at least another 6 when the outgoing start. Hope Windass isn't true, though the guy's a moron, bit harsh. And a couple of more on Rangers. Robert says Vaclav Cherny should have been signed with Lennon Miller. Young in years, but so much ability, they didn't come along too often. Perfect fit at Rangers if you want the best. On Windass, Donny says 18 goal contributions last season, available on a free, knows the league, knows the club, a smart, low-risk option, but Mikey counters it by saying he was an empty shirt when he was here and he's found his level. And Rangers away day says Windass, plenty of talent, but it comes with the heart of a mouse. He is keen on bringing Hadji back though.
Just in terms of Windass, Daniel, I mean, look, I think on a free transfer, getting Josh Windass back, the guy said there, knows the league, knows Rangers. I think he's a far better player now than he was when he was at Rangers first time around or when he left. So on a free transfer, I think he'd score goals in the Scottish Premiership. So it's certainly something that Rangers might look at. But I was speaking to somebody today. I mean, I think I'm right in saying Wrexham are also in for Windass and are offering them decent money to go there. We know obviously about the backing that they've got and the kind of ambitions that they've got.
I saw Norwich as well, Scott. Norwich.
What's that?
Norwich in for them as well.
Aye, so I think he'll definitely have other options. So my gut is that in terms of Rangers, that probably won't happen. Hadji as well. I don't know what Keith thinks. I'm a big fan of Hadji, and we stuck up for him a lot on this show last season when he was going through a tough time at Rangers for a variety of reasons. But I don't know, it just feels like once he's away, once he's gone, to then kind of pull him back, just doesn't feel right. And again, my gut is, as I say, even though I'm a big fan of Hadji, and I thought, especially when he first arrived at Rangers, he was a terrific player. But I don't know. I think that ship's probably sailed now with Hadji.
Do you know what I think there, Scott? What's I think is interesting, and you're starting to see patterns in terms of the Rangers recruitment drive and profiles of the sort of players they're looking for, and it's the first window that's really made sense in terms of you can see the jigsaw coming together a little bit, and the identikit of what Russell Martin is looking for. What I think Hadji would maybe struggle, and why I think it's doubtful, and I do think he's a really talented boy. Of course he is. But it seems to me that Rangers are really gearing up to be a physical side next season. I don't just mean physical as in, aggressive and want to, battle with people. But I think the defenders look like specimens. Big boys, athletic. There seems to be an emphasis on, a bit of height and physicality, but also an ability to play the ball out from the back. You can see that in the signings that are being made. And in terms of up front, it looks like speed is going to be the key. That all the players, and when you look at their attributes, the guys that are getting mentioned, the guys that appear to be on Russell Martin's wish list, there's pace all over it. And that's what you would look at Hadji and think, are you going to fit into the sort of blueprint of a side that Russell Martin, all the technical ability going, Yanis Hadji, And I think he's a very good professional as well, and the right sort of guy. I think as a professional, he's top notch. But would he have that pace? He's certainly not. That's the one thing that was lacking from his game, would have been pace. I think anybody would say that.
Mm-hmm.
So he doesn't feel to me as if he would fit into the sort of prototype of player that Russell Martin appears to be profiling for this recruitment drive. And I think the big difference is, had this been last year, Rangers with the scattergun approach, yep, I'll take that one, this one. But for the first time in years, you can actually see what it is that they're trying to put together, as opposed to just picking random guys from left, right and centre and hoping it comes good.
Keith, I think you're right, but no, the interesting thing about that is, but so far, pretty much every player has been for the English market. I think every player they've signed is for the English market. Now, ordinarily, you would think, that's quite risky. Why you kind of putting yourself in a corner with just going to England, right? We know that it's a market Russell Martin and Kevin Thelwell know best. But as I say, ordinarily, you'd think, is that maybe a wee bit narrow-minded? Do they need to broaden their horizons, look at other leagues? But as you say, I think previously when Rangers have went down that route, you've had reason to kind of question certain signings and wonder why they were going for them, where they would fit in, what the attributes were. But actually, I agree with you, even though they have all been for England so far, I'm pretty much looking at everyone and I can see why Russell Martin's going for them and where they might fit into this Rangers team. There does seem to be a proper strategy behind it, even though, as I say, they're coming for the one country now. Listen, that might not continue. As one of the comments said there, I think Rangers probably still got another 5 or 6 to get in. And when they go and try and get strikers and attacking players, you tend to find they can be more pricey down south. So it might be like a Turgeman, for instance, who's been mentioned in Israel. Might be that the attack-minded players, they need to go further afield. But I think it's really interesting in terms of them focusing on that market, because people always but when you go to the Championship, and even Fernandes in League One, people always say, is that going to be good enough? People underestimate Scottish football. They think these guys will come up and scoosh it up here, and a lot of times it doesn't happen. But I agree with you. I think even though they're in that market, you're looking at all of these players and you can see real potential there and where they're going to fit into this Rangers team.
I certainly just think there's a strategy, Scott, and that's what Rangers have been missing in the transfer market. They were recruiting this one from there, that one from over there, and there was no set, you weren't looking at any of them going, well, if he comes out the team, he goes in, I see that, he'll do a similar job. It was all individuals, wasn't it? The previous sort of transfer windows, with no grand plan or design as to what it's actually going to look like when it's on the pitch together. And I think this time there's hope for Rangers fans that they've got a recruitment drive that is in full swing at the minute, and it's moving towards something, a sort of a vision of what Russell Martin wants his team to look like. And that I think is a good first step. Now, the interesting thing, I think you're absolutely right with that, Scott, is there is a sort of an attitude, I think, which is often prevalent, which is, well, if we bring them up from England, they're bound to be better than anything else in Scotland. And that's a bad mistake. It's been made before by many, many people, and by Rangers on very many occasions as well. But I think what you see, and we're talking about the kind of profile, Russell Martin obviously knows the market, and that's obviously first and foremost, it's his rebuild. He's in charge of it, or he's the guy that his neck's going to be on the block if it doesn't work. So I can absolutely sympathise with wanting to go into the market that he knows the best. But two, when you look at the guys, are they Premier League players? There are some guys involved in this that have made it to the Premier League and just haven't quite, at a decent level. It's not as if they've got to the Premier League and, kind of stumbled around at the bottom end of it. Clubs like Bournemouth and Wolves, for example, they're good Premiership, established Premier League clubs. So if you can't just quite nail down a place in the starting 11 at a Bournemouth or a Wolves, there is enough there to suggest you should be able to cope with the Scottish Premier League.
Yeah.
And then there's another kind of level of player, the players that have done really well at the top end of the Championship, that were, Premier League bound. And I can understand the thinking behind all that, because Rangers' biggest problem last season wasn't the one-to-ones or the heads-to-heads with Celtic. It was beating St Mirren and Motherwell and dropping points at Kilmarnock and whatever else. So if you can put a squad of players together that are at that level, then there is every reason to believe it should be strong enough to take care of all the rest. And then you take your chances against Celtic. And do you know what? That's maybe not the daftest sort of approach to take. Because I think, and you've seen it for a couple of years now with this Rangers squad, they're really comfortable and really adept at playing in Europe, but they just don't seem to get the bread and butter of the domestic scene. And I think, and we've discussed it before, Scott, I actually do see the sense in going back to a more British core. And as you said, later in the market, if you want a winger from wherever or a striker from abroad, but they amalgamate into a core of a dressing room which is, has got the sort of British values. And that's what Celtic have built up, that core value over the years. They've been able to do it more by bringing through their own players and having guys with Scottish background. And I think that's really benefited Celtic. Rangers don't have that luxury this summer. They need to assemble something big and kind of overnight. And I can understand the thinking behind it, the theory behind it. It'll be fascinating to see what it looks like in practice.
And see talking about maybe underestimating the Scottish game. The good thing for Rangers' point of view, or it should be a good thing, is that because Russell Martin's played at Rangers, he should know the standard. No, he should know what's required.
He struggled as a player.
Exactly. So there shouldn't be any excuses. He should be signing guys like an Asgard, for instance, and he should. Russell Martin must be convinced in his own mind. This boy will shine up here. I know what the standards like, and he will be better than anything else up here. So there are no excuses in that front. It's not as if like an English manager who's never played up here, never worked up here. Exactly. Or a foreign manager coming in who does underestimate Scottish football. We know Scottish football is no brilliant in terms of standard, but I think we all agree it's pretty unique, and it's not as easy as what you think. You need to be a special type of character to deal with up here and really shine in this league. But Russell Martin's seen it firsthand, so he should know. And he wouldn't have signed these boys if he didn't think they were going to come up here and, as Keith says, be more than good enough to at least beat the rest, and then the Old Firm games take care of themselves.
I've got an absolute plethora of comments to get through, guys. So let me throw a few of them at you. If you want to get involved in the discussion, please send us in your comments and we will try to get through them. Greg thanks us for bringing him closer to Scottish football in Canada. He's asking if Scott McKenna is a realistic target for Rangers or Celtic, and a few people asking that in the comment section. I don't know if you guys have heard anything along those lines.
Scott McKenna has been a person of interest for both clubs at various moments, over the period. Brendan Rodgers wanted to get him when he was leaving Aberdeen. Brendan Rodgers was prepared to bid, I think it was over £3 million at the time. So that tells you that Brendan Rodgers has rated him since then. That was Brendan's first stint at Celtic. And obviously he went down to Nottingham Forest, and I think he did fine, and he's developed. And if you're asking me, if you were at Celtic right now and you were looking at your options, and as we've said, the big challenge for Brendan Rodgers is to find a left-sided centre-half that can be as robust and as capable and as trustworthy as the right-hand side, which is Cameron Carter-Vickers, obviously. I tell you what, I think they could do worse. Kevin McKenna playing next to Cameron Carter-Vickers, that's a very solid, physical pairing. And also, I think Scott McKenna's a lot better on the ball than people give him credit for. Mm-hmm. I think that he's shown that in a Scotland shirt, his ability to come out from the back and to link with the midfield and all that. I think he's quite an underrated player, Scott McKenna. I think he's better than a lot of people up here give him credit for. And I know for a fact that if, as I said the other night, if Barry Ferguson had got that Rangers job, I think Scott McKenna was one of the players that he would have been taking a close look at this summer.
Mikey in the comments points out that signing at English Championship players hasn't worked for Rangers in recent years. Dow and Lawrence were touted to be good signings at the time. But David Ross comes back saying signing players that aren't ready for the EPL just now, but if Rangers can get them to that level, they will make them a lot of money. So many comments coming in. David again says players coming on completely different profiles from Lawrence, Davies and Dowell. Colonel Mustard says, I don't doubt the talent of some of the players coming in. The big question is, are they strong enough to wear the jersey? Time will tell, but I'm looking forward to finding out. Mark says, not one single player signed would get into that Celtic squad, let alone team. I mean, it's a big call.
It is a big call, but listen.
Sorry, Keith. Last one. Timmy says, what a mess this is. Both segment and Rangers. Sorry, Timmy. We'll try and up our game. Sorry about that, mate.
Listen, the thing that Mark's saying there, I'm not going to have an argument with him about that. But that's to ignore the fact that Celtic are so far in front. We're talking about a differential here. For Celtic have won 13 of the last 14 league titles. So we're not starting, it's not a level playing field. Celtic are acknowledged to be a long, long way in front of Rangers. But Rangers have to do whatever they can, whatever feasible, to try and close a little bit of that gap. I've said it, none of these signings have taken in isolation. You would go, wow, what a signing that is. That's incredible bit of business. They're not headline grabbing. But I can see in terms of if you're trying to build a team, and you're trying to have certain specific values and a tactical approach, I can understand the profile of the guys that are coming in. And at least there's joined up thinking, because Rangers have been guilty of just going here, there and everywhere over the last few years, desperately hoping to unearth a gem from somewhere, but not really putting any joined up thinking into how these guys all get together in one team. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the big difference from what I see of this Rangers approach to the transfer window currently.
You can see Mark there pointing out that Abdullah Sima was terrific at Rangers, asking what his current situation is. Alan Austin says that Cody's missus isn't keen on a move to Glasgow. I don't know if you guys know if that's maybe what's holding up the deal there.
I'm not sure what's holding it up, Daniel, because I thought, if I'm being honest, I thought it'd have been done by now. I think Connor Cody even played for Leicester at the last weekend in a bounce game or a friendly game. And obviously Djiga's come in the day in the same position, but I mean I still believe Rangers obviously want to make the Cody deal happen. Is it to do with they need to get Ben Davies, Robin Proper, guys like that out the door first? I'm not quite sure, but I think in Russell Martin's mind, he probably wants he wants 4 centre backs. Every manager likes to have 4 centre backs in the squad. Probably in his mind, he's thinking Suter, Djiga, Cody, and Fernandes as he's 4 at the back. So, listen, there's a long way to go in the window. We're not sure what the situation is at Leicester, in terms of what might be holding it up. But we know obviously Rangers are keen on him and want to try and make it happen. I did a piece last week, obviously with Jermaine Defoe, who'd actually sat with Connor Cody and spoke about it. So I mean, it's definitely in the pipeline. Cody was talking about how great it would be to go to Rangers. So I still expect something to happen, but why it's taking so long, I'm not so sure.
My feeling on that one is, Scott, that I think it's Leicester that are, because he's a Leicester player, and Leicester aren't going to let him go until they feel they're in the, they've got the reinforcements that they require. And if he's still at a point where they're needing him for pre-season games, that tells you that they don't feel suitably equipped to let him go. And I think that what I'm hearing is that is the potential for why this thing has been held up a little bit. As I said on the first day that Connor Cody returned to Leicester for the start of pre-season training after the under-21 Euros, I was amazed at that because I thought he'd be arriving in Glasgow instead. But Leicester are the ones that need to green light this move, and I think it will be done at a point in time when Leicester feel that they've got adequate resources to allow it to happen. And I think that's what's holding this up, and I think that's the only thing that's holding it up.
Well, Mark in the comments says that he thinks it's Robin Proper holding it up because 20 can't afford his wages to sign him. And PK says, Keith, it's a carbon copy of Beale. I mean, does this recruitment drive give you, I was going to say Ian Beale, Michael Beale vibes?
No, it doesn't, and for the reason that I've just explained, Daniel, there was no rhyme or reason to, lace together what Michael Beale was trying to do. It was a hodgepodge of different signings from all over, and no sign that he knew how he was going to blend it all into a team. There was, we keep using the word profile. There was no kind of pattern of profile to the guys that were coming in. And that's what I think is different. Although I do accept that there'll be a lot of people out there very sceptical, and I'll remain sceptical myself until I see what it looks like on the pitch. But what I'm saying is, I do understand, and at least this time, I can see what Rangers are trying to achieve and what they're trying to work towards. Previously, in the summer of Sam Lammers, that wasn't very clear at all.
We've got plenty of comments coming in Celtic's recruitment. Should we move on to that for a little bit as time's
Sure.
getting on? Davey says Celtic's recruitment will be a good mix of prospects maturity. Rangers look like they're going down the usual journeyman route and English deadwood. Although there's some Celtic fans that aren't particularly happy. The board's too tight, wise scale still within. This one, though, we mentioned Inamura at the top of the show. And Stephen says, I interrupted my holiday in Cork to take the match in. Inamura being such a standout. Brendan Rodgers must regret saying he previously could go out on loan. I believe there's a bit of Virgil van Dijk about him, the way he takes the ball out of defence. And even this early, we seemingly unearthed another Japanese jewel. We did the watch along last night, Keith, for the game. I think we were a wee bit distracted with the show, but there was no doubt Inamura played well.
Yeah, he looked fine. Look, do you know what? It's a pre-season friendly against Cork City. Now's not the time to get out the bunting and say that Celtic have unearthed the next Virgil van Dijk. That seems a bit of a sort of overreaction to it. But certainly he did enough in his 45 minutes last night to make Brendan Rodgers have a rethink. And that's not easily achieved. So that tells you that he might be, to use the old Graham Souness phrase, a better player than I first thought, in terms of Brendan thought he was coming in to give him a ticket to go someplace else immediately on loan, and he seems to be revising his kind of initial thoughts on that. So he's clearly done enough in a couple of days training and with 45 minutes in Ireland last night to give Brendan Rodgers reason to pause and to delay any decision that might have been imminent there. And credit to him for that. But as I said, it's 45 minutes of a friendly match in Cork, a kickabout really. And he did look fine, and he looked certainly very comfortable in the ball coming forward. And he was playing at left back as opposed to left centre half, which would be his more natural position apparently. But yeah, he looked useful, but now's not the time to make a definitive decision on whether or not he is first team ready or not for Celtic.
Pegleg Lonergan, you can see in the comments, says we can't get carried away with 45 minutes against Cork City, something that Paul Brady agrees with as well. I mean, the other piece of transfer news, Keith, that I thought we should touch on in regards to Celtic, one name that we talked about last night was Rapid Vienna winger Isak Jansson. He's been linked with Celtic. He was the guy that directly replaced Nicholas Kuhn when he came to Celtic. He's definitely a name that it was understood Celtic are definitely keen on, but it looks like they've missed out. He's apparently on his way to Nice.
Yeah. And I look, this is what I'm saying, Dan, in terms of this frenzy of speculation. It's very difficult to work out and establish what's real and what's not. That was a phrase that Russell Martin used the other day. You'll find out what's real over the coming days. Was this one real? I have to say it feels like it was. And we've been having this conversation now for a couple of days, Dan, about are there two separate strategies at play here in Celtic's strategy in the transfer market? Do we have a sort of a pivot back to the old style, the board approved methods, which is, spend a significant sum of money, but spread it out on a variety of different young players and hope that 2 or 3 of them come good. I see that in a lot of the moves that Celtic are making this summer. But then you've got the Brendan Rodgers approach to it, which he was very keen to promote and to push forward this time last year, which was, well, no, guys, what you should do is be a little bit braver. Instead of spending, I don't know, £12 million on 4 players, let's spend it on 1 or 2, because that's where you'll get the real rewards. And Celtic could argue that maybe that didn't quite work out the way that it had been promised in the brochure this time last year. And Brendan Rodgers could rightly hit back with, yeah, but look, we made the Champions League group stages. Look at all the money that we brought in from that, and wouldn't it be good if we did that again this year? That's, well, 60 million quid in its own. So I mentioned last night there's a possibility here that what we're actually witnessing is a sort of hybrid between the two, where Brendan Rodgers gets to go and buy the sort of marquee guys at the top end, and meanwhile, in the background, Celtic's board go about, as I think Brendan Rodgers described in a moor himself, didn't he, as a club investment purchase. So that tells you that there are, I think, 2 different strands to how Celtic are going about their business. And what I do believe, and what I've said consistently enough, I think the bigger sort of headline acts, I think, come later in the window, and I think they're the ones that Brendan Rodgers will be going for. My concern being that I think that boy, I just felt that he had Brendan Rodgers' fingerprints on him. The profile and the sort of price range, that felt more like a Brendan Rodgers idea than a board idea. Mm-hmm. And, well, look, as I said, there's no way of knowing for sure. And I'm sure that even if that is the case, that Brendan Rodgers will have more than one iron in the fire, because he's very adept at it.
Paul Price in the comments says, it hurts me to say this as a Celtic fan, but you have to give credit to the Rangers board for backing their manager, getting their signings bedded in early. Well, our board, who obviously learned nothing from the John McGinn fiasco, they continue to dilly-dally, forget about Rodgers extending his contract. It won't happen, and you couldn't blame them with this board. We talked about that last night as well, Keith, didn't we? That this summer could potentially shape Brendan Rodgers' future.
I think it's difficult, Daniel, for Celtic, and Keith's touched on it there, but see, just striking that balance, because there's obviously money in the bank, so there's cash there to spend. Brendan Rodgers wants to get the best players possible, and the fans demand the big fees. When it was 11 million for Engels and 9 million for Ida, 6 for Trusty, it felt as if they were going up a level, and you could argue it worked for them. They get a double, and maybe even more importantly, they progress further in the Champions League. But where do you go for there? The way the Champions League is, how far can you actually go? I mean, what do you need to spend to go a couple of stages further, or even just one stage further? So it's such a difficult balancing act, because I say there'll be a desire there to go and spend serious money and get the best players in. But at the same time, they've been so successful with this model of buying players relatively cheap, still winning things, still seeing off Rangers domestically, and then even better, selling these guys for a profit. Kuhn is obviously the prime example now, assuming that deal goes through. And even with the challenge from Rangers, I mean, and I agree with Keith at the start saying, it's a bit of an arms race now, and they are aware that it looks like there's going to be a bigger challenge from across the city, but they don't. They were 17 points, a gap at the end of last season. I mean, there'll be people within Celtic probably think, 1 or 2 tweaks this summer, and we should still be ahead of Rangers no matter what they do. So I just think it's a really difficult balance in it, and that's where I think Jacko's right, that there seems to be this kind of hybrid now where, okay, there can be a couple of club projects like Inamura, who Brendan Rodgers is willing to work with if they're good enough, but at the same time, he's still the manager and he's still got to think about a Rangers challenge. Might be his last season at Celtic. I've said this before. He'll want to get on the ultimate high, winning everything, more progress in Europe. So it's a difficult difficult balancing act, and that's why it's going to be so interesting and intriguing as the window goes on, or certainly getting towards the end of the window to see how they look at the end up.
But if there is a compromise there, Scotty, and it's an agreed compromise, and Brendan Rodgers is happy to cede to the club that, yep, you know, if you've got, you know, some targets that you want to go and invest in because you think they're projects that will turn a profit, go and do it. But just so long as Brendan Rodgers feels that he's still getting the amount of backing financially that he feels he needs in order to improve his first 11. That is the driving force for Brendan Rodgers. It's not who's going to be good in 3 years' time. It's who's going to be good now, who's going to make the team better next season, the starting 11, who's going to come in and take the place of one of the guys that was a starter last season. That's where Brendan Rodgers is shopping. That's where his concentration and focus goes. And I completely understand that. And what I would say further than that is, if he feels that he's got that backing and he's getting that support and it gets him to where he wants to go, Scott, in terms of a domestic treble, more progress in Europe, and just a real strong season, perhaps even breaking through that 100-point barrier, which we talked about this time last year, would be a target for him. He came up 8 points short, but I think he drew 5 and lost 4 league games. Now, in Brendan Rodgers' mind, that being a perfectionist, that's not good enough. So where can he find the next level player that takes him just that little bit better, that helps turn those, you know, 5 draws and 4 defeats into a couple of draws and 1 defeat, and allows him to put down a real strong season, perhaps a mirror image of his first ever season in Scottish football, when, you know, they went undefeated and won the lot. And I think he'll probably want to go even one better than that, by then achieving something in Europe. That's what Brendan Rodgers is requiring. And I think if he feels he's been properly backed and the finances are made available for him to buy a couple of players that do that and make them stronger as a starting 11, and he goes on to have that sort of success this season, that's potentially a game changer in terms of, does he want to go again when his 3-year deal's up?
See on that, Jack, and I don't know if you boys have discussed this in the last couple of nights, but
you've not been watching.
Are you surprised? And again, a lot of stuff I've been covering obviously has been Rangers, but are you surprised, or do you think Celtic will be disappointed with missing out in Quaysgarden? Because that seemed like the fee being reported at Norwich seems to be like
6.9.
6.9. That to me would almost be, in terms of profile, price tag, sell-on potential, that would have seemed that no doable for. And it seems like they've been linked to him for so long. I mean, there must have been a real interest there. I mean, his name was constantly mentioned. Do you think he'll be a bit disappointed that they didn't get that deal done?
I was saying that, Keith. Remember, we talked about it the other night, and I think you made a good point, to be fair, that they let it go so easily, Celtic, or seemingly so easily, that maybe they've got another iron in the fire. Maybe there's something else.
That's my belief on this. And I might be proven wrong, but I strongly suspect, and I know that this boy has been a person of interest in and around Celtic Park for not just one transfer window. We're talking about, I'm going to say, as many as 7 or 8 of the past transfer windows. He has been on a list. He's been on a list of targets, and it was actually explained to me some time ago that had Celtic acted when he was first originally identified, I think it was by Mark Lowell. So that shows we're going back a bit. And had Celtic moved at that point, I think they would have got him for a real. I mean, you're talking, you know, relative buttons. And I believe that Celtic. This is what surprised me about the price. I think Celtic thought that you'd need to go to 10 million or above to get him in at this point, and yet it turns out there's some sort of contractual clause which allowed him to go to Norwich for 6.9. That really does surprise me, and there's no way Celtic haven't done their homework on it. Mm-hmm. So it tells me that I believe that Brendan Rodgers thinks he has identified something better than that, and probably something a little bit more expensive.
Paul Brady points out that the better players move later in the window as they have more options to weigh up where they can go. And as you say, Keith, it's only what is it? The 9th
so early.
Aye.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people saying, Mark saying, obviously, they've still not signed a replacement for Kyogo. John saying that as well. And a couple of people asking Mikey here, saying any word on Yamada, the Kawasaki striker. And I mean, so many strikers as well, Keith, have been linked with Celtic. We talked about Ambrosino yesterday, but there's more.
Yeah, I mean, again, if we're saying there might be two separate kind of strategies at play, I think that the Japanese striker that we're talking about there would come into the club investment branch, and I don't believe for a single second that he's a guy that Brendan Rodgers has picked out and said, "Yep, go for him for 1.5 million. That'll do me as Kyogo's replacement." I just don't believe it. So, it could well be that he's another one that Brendan Rodgers is happy to accommodate in terms of, yep, he can come in, and if he has to go away again for a season or so, that's fine as well. But Brendan Rodgers will have his targets, and the Celtic's failure to beat Norwich to Kvistgarden tells me that I don't believe that Celtic were serious. Because if Celtic wanted to get him, they could have got him. And it tells me there must be something else. There's something else that we're not quite seeing. And I'll come again, I've been saying this for some weeks now. I believe from the outset of this transfer window that Brendan Rodgers' priority has been a marquee signing as a striker to replace Kyogo. And that won't come from Japan for £1.5 million.
And you would think if Kvistgarden had the option of Norwich or Celtic,
Exactly, Scott.
Champions League, I mean, it would be a no-brainer. No, even I know people say, "Oh, but the Championship's a big league and it might lead to the Premier League." But Celtic have proved already
they're the pathway.
Celtic's a pathway to the Premier League, so there should have been no holding the boy back. If that was a serious option for him, as I say, he was linked to loads of other clubs. If it came down to Celtic or Norwich, I'm convinced the boy would have chose Celtic, which makes it even more surprising. But Jacko might be right. Maybe Celtic have got something else up their cuff, which you think will be even better.
Pegleg there says Ferguson on loan and transfer deadline day. That was the one that I'd said. If you remember, that I had a feeling, based on nothing, that Evan Ferguson could end up coming. But actually, reports in Italy today, he's actually pretty close to going to Roma on loan for the season. So that would kind of kibosh that.
It would, Daniel.
Which is a shame. Is there anything else Celtic-wise we should talk about? We're getting a couple of questions in here. Mark says, will Mulligan be a good sign for Hibs? Derek McInnes wants Kevin Nisbet. How do you think Hearts will do? I don't know, Keith, if you want to take that one.
Mulligan's a good player.
Yeah, really good player.
I think that's a really smart bit of business by Hibs, to be perfectly honest with you. I think he'll do a real turn for them. What was the rest of the question?
Saying Hearts are after Kevin Nisbet, and how well will they do under McInnes? I think we've talked about that a wee bit, haven't we? And obviously now Shankland is back. I think they're in for a really good season, Hearts.
Yeah, and Hearts have signed another striker who's already said that he'll be the top scorer in Scottish football next season. So, look, do you know what? Because Derek McInnes plays the way that Derek McInnes plays, and he prefers to play with two central strikers, certainly that is certainly the way of things at Command. That's what I expect to see at Hearts. A real front foot, aggressive approach to games. Couple of strikers. Lawrence Shankland's obviously going to be one of them. But yeah, if he feels, if Kevin Nisbet became a realistic target, again, wow. I mean, the firepower then that Hearts are beginning to assemble ahead of the new season fits in and backs everything up that I've suggested, that there's plenty of reason for the Hearts supporters to be excited. Absolutely.
How far could they go, Scott? If they had Nisbet and Shankland up front, firing in all cylinders, could they launch a title bid? I'm smirking as I say that because I know I'm going to get slaughtered for it. But
listen, I don't think so. And in terms of Kevin Nisbet, I mean, Jacko's. I know they will want to play with two strikers, but they've already got Shankland, Claudio Braga, the boy coming in for Estonia that's making claims about his goal return and stuff like that. So, I mean, they're pretty well stocked already. That's before you think guys like Vargas and that who's still there. So I think they're pretty well off as it stands. Obviously, there might be a few kind of outgoings at Hearts before the window closes, and Derek McInnes will obviously look at it. Injuries can play a part as well, but I think even as we sit here just now, they've got a very decent squad. I'm not going to say they're going to split the old firm or go for title challenge, but the target for Hearts, as it always should be third and getting into Europe and trying to do well in cups, try to win a trophy. Undoubtedly, that's what Derek McInnes will be thinking. And look, if they can go off to a brilliant start, as we've suggested on here, because they've not got Europe and they can hit the ground running, get off to a flyer, who knows where it might take them to, and suddenly their goals and ambitions might change as the season goes on. But no, you need to be careful. They were a bottom 6 team last season, Hearts. So if they can get up fighting third, fourth, blooding a few noses in terms of when they go to the Old Firm and stuff like that, then I think McInnes will be pretty happy.
Scott, you just need to look at Tony Bloom's track record here to get an idea for his direction of travel at Tynecastle. I think you're right. I think that it would be too much too soon to expect Hearts to split the Old Firm or make that a realistic target for next season. Is third place a realistic target for next season? You better believe it. Yeah. I think that with the sort of momentum and with the money that's going into this, and with Derek McInnes as the manager, I think that Hearts have every right to look at that as the target, third place. Anything less than that, I think Derek McInnes would probably be pretty disappointed in. And on top of that, if you listen, you know how managers set the tone and they say some stuff, and perhaps in the dressing room there's a bit of messaging going on about what you say when you're in front of the cameras. And Derek McInnes hasn't shied away at any point from saying he wants silverware. And I noticed Lorne Shanklin was speaking today, and that was he echoed it was almost like he'd got Derek McInnes's notes in front of him and was saying much the same things. I'm telling you, they believe third place is where they should be by the end of next season. But I also think they really firmly believe they've got the potential here to upset the apple cart and get amongst the silverware. It's not going to be the league title, but it'll be incremental steps. And I think if Tony Bloom ends next season with Hearts in third place, he'll feel that he's moving them in the right direction. And from that platform, he will look to take them further, because that's the Tony Bloom model.
I think this sums up some of the comments I'm getting in. Thomas says Hearts will finish second behind Celtic. Sing the Blues says Hearts will finish second behind Rangers. So there you go. Aye, exactly. Hashtag banter. I think that brings to the end of Wednesday night's Hotline Live with Record Sport. The comments have been unbelievable again tonight. We really appreciate it. If you want to get involved in the conversation, we'll be back to do it all at 6 p.m. tomorrow night, and we hope you can join us then. Scott, you'll be down at St George's Park with Rangers, I understand?
I will be, yeah, tomorrow.
We'll hopefully maybe get you on for a cameo, but we'll see what your movements are. But I think that brings to the end of the show. Keith, it's always a pleasure.
And you, mate.
And you too, Scott. And thanks for watching at home. Cheers.